Hey everyone, welcome to What Kind of Internet Do You Want? And our Web3 weekly live show going through the news of Web3 and talking about, adoption and craziness and regulatory news. So I'm Amy James.
I'm Devin James. We're looking at a price of just short of $35,000 for Bitcoin. So that's exciting.
And that is our top story actually this week, because Bitcoin hit $35,000 for the first time since May of 2022. It gained more than 12% in 24 hours. Followers of the show know we rarely talk about the price in any sort of detail because we believe it's the technology that is far more important and impactful on our day-to-day lives. But we are making a special case because this week it had some craziness with this little bull mini run it went on. And a result of that was that I was on Bloomberg Technology yesterday speaking about that with the
yes, that was fantastic.
Team there. So that was really fun because we got to talk about how the Bitcoin price could be going up for a number of reasons, and we'll get into that here shortly, but that the technology itself is what's more important, and it's the price runs that actually bring more and more people into Web3 surreptitiously, right? It's the price that gets people's attention because it's exciting, and then they learn about the technology and how profound and important the technology is. And so the DPIN space is really set up to be the next breakout hit of the next Bitcoin run, and anybody in Bitcoin knows that it moves in these cycles and that we are anticipating a run here in the near future. So anyway, let's talk about the reasons people were speculating that the Bitcoin price went up. Basically, as we all have been waiting on for so long now, Bitcoin ETF approval has been speculated about, and there were some maybe potential indicators of the approval happening. Blackrock's spot iShares Bitcoin ETF was on the DTCC website on Monday, and when you're going through an ETF process, there's some basic steps to the process. One is to register it and get it approved. The next would be to get it listed on the exchanges, and that's what the DTCC website listing would indicate. And then the fund itself would need to seed itself. It would need to purchase a large amount of the asset. In this case, obviously, that would be Bitcoin, in order to be able to be the market maker for those exchanges, for those trades. Am I getting all of that right?
I wouldn't say market maker as much as, because what they're doing is they're selling a paper version of Bitcoin, and so they need to hold the Bitcoin.
So it's like their reserves.
Itself.
Okay.
Exactly.
Sorry, my bad on that. Okay. So did the price go up because the listing happened? Did the price go up because they were acquiring significant amounts and driving the price up in so doing? Did the price go up because of all of the chaos happening in the world that is making people feel really unstable and turning to Bitcoin as, a place to kind of hedge and have some safer money that they control?
Perhaps it's all that inflation.
Perhaps it's impending World War III.
But
there's a bunch of different...
Didn't it show up on the website and then disappear the next day?
Yes, that's right. So we have... Let's see. Yeah, in this story right here. So it disappeared. So it was on the website on Monday. That caused the initial run. And then on Tuesday, it disappeared. And now the listing is back on the DTCC website.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried that was just a mistake or something.
Well, also what's interesting is that the price is held.
Yeah.
Often when we have one of those runs and then it's revealed.
Yeah, because just last week there was
down.
Fake news that they'd gotten approved, and in the course of the hour before they came out and said, no, we definitely it's still being reviewed, the price spiked, and then no, it didn't crash until they came out and said, it hasn't happened. But it it basically recovered all the way back down to where it was before, if I remember correctly. And this time it hasn't, because it's hard to remember just a week ago what the price used to be. Sometimes. It was below 30, and I was stoked.
It's been hanging out in the 20s.
I was stoked that it actually hit 30, and now here it is hanging out,
34
right now
or
it's
something.
34,538. So
Yeah. So interesting to see what may be happening. Also, just we're keeping an eye on this because, as I mentioned, Bitcoin moves in these cycles that somewhat coincide with the halving cycle, and the period of time that we're in bear markets, we see a lot of building happening, and they're quieter times when people tell us that crypto is never going to happen, and, right? It's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
And then we move back into the bull runs when there's just a tremendous amount of excitement and new people entering the space. And it's important for us to just know when those bull times are happening.
Well, what's funny is you can kind of find out what they are by looking at when all the big money VCs kind of capitulate and go like, because I just read a thread about this. Literally, someone just, I think the day before this run, Jason Calcanis did a tweet where he was basically saying like, it's not working. This isn't happening. Like Bitcoin with all the other pressures that are happening, Bitcoin should be soaring and it's not. And I think it was like literally the day that it took off. So it was hilarious. And someone quote tweeted that basically to show, I don't know if he had done this 4 years before, but a number of others were just like, oh, I'm done. It's just never going to happen. And it's right when they do that it takes off.
What's funny is that I've been feeling that lately to some degree. Like,
there you go.
And I've been feeling it more just like, we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary of being in the space, and it's like, why has it taken so long for people, for adoption to happen? Like, I've just been feeling super frustrated in that regard.
Yeah.
And but I will say that what just happened with that example really shows how there are so many people that try to predict when the bull runs will start, when the bear markets will start, and the last bear market was started with the collapse of Terra Luna in May of 2022, and that was super unexpected. Most people thought we had still like twice the amount to go in terms of the price. At that point, we thought that it would go on for another several months, and then that happened, and so that these things can't be predicted. There was a period of time where the stock to flow model was really popular and people thought that was a way to predict it. That's since been disproven, right? There's just been like these different ways that people try to time their market entry. And I think that really the takeaway is that you have an opportunity right now to get into this asset class at a very similar cost basis as someone like Michael Saylor, who has incredible, he's an enormous holdings in this space because he believes in it, and he's an incredible speaker if you want to get some more education on Bitcoin. He's somebody to definitely listen to. And this is potentially the last period of the market where we will be kind of in this range on the numbers. So
I mean,
that's think about.
We like to say that every time. It's the last time we're ever going to see 30, last time we're ever going to see 20. And then
it's like a running
sometimes
joke too.
It is for us especially.
Yeah.
It might be though.
I mean, I'm not saying that this moment is. I'm saying this cycle.
This period for sure. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, because you never
when we hit the next run, it may go back to this at some point, but it seems unlikely.
Historically, exactly.
Right?
Because we've never once you leave a range and move to the next range, it might touch on the top of it again, but we're never going to go back into the 1,000 range. I mean, obviously, you can't predict the future.
Right?
It could come crashing down.
Right.
Someone could discover some, backdoor that the White House has access to or something.
Oh, God.
It'd be hard to believe, given that it's transparent and you can see all the workings of it, and it's a relatively simple machine. I don't want to insult it, but it is.
No.
So it'd be hard to find what kind of vector that could be, but maybe public keys are in fact not as secure as we think they are. Who knows? So something could come out that makes this whole thing fall apart and we actually see that 1,000 again. If that doesn't happen and adoption continues to happen in similar patterns, then no, we're not going to ever revisit the kind of ranges that we've seen in the past again, hopefully. So, we're looking at kind of our overall deep in markets. And then also, again, just to remind you, at the bottom here is going to be kind of top movers and I think most highest market caps are what's streaming across the bottom there. And then in the middle, we've got deep in. On a week average, pretty much everything in deep in did fantastic, up, at least kind of 10% is kind of the average there, it looks like.
It's because of my appearance on Bloomberg.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. You're welcome,
Obviously,
guys.
Filecoin. She mentioned Filecoin. They're up 18%. You're welcome. Cash is up 28%. Live Peer 12%. Arweave 20%. So this is fantastic. It's pretty reasonable to believe that a lot of this is just because they're traded mostly in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin went up so much. But they're still feeling the benefit of it. Unfortunately, not Pocket. Don't know why. Don't know if they had some bad news. I think I remember that they actually surged on their own from something recently. So maybe this is just kind of a recovery from that. So, yeah. But generally, looking pretty dang good for the DPIN aspect of this industry. At least currently, Flux up 10%. Yeah, fantastic. Storage even up 20%. Good Lord.
Storage has been having a big run this year.
SIA actually just kind of lost a partner because they weren't kind of happy with things, and they're up 10%. So, wowzers. Anywho, next up.
So we had one little kind of like additional point to that story because in looking at the Bitcoin price and whatnot, we kind of stumbled upon this clip of Steve Wozniak talking about how he doesn't buy stocks, but he has purchased Bitcoin.
So I don't invest.
You don't invest.
I have never invested in stock in my life. I've never used Apple's stock app on the iPhone. I don't want that to affect my life, so I never invested in stocks. Bitcoin, I bought a bunch of Bitcoin at the start to say, how do you play with this new thing? How do you buy something online? And I conquered that. And how do you buy things in other countries? And how would you even pay for like a donut in another country? Mm-hmm. How can you find an ATM that works on your Bitcoin? And I wanted to experiment and learn it all. And then Bitcoin went way up. Well, I got scared and I sold all my Bitcoin except one Bitcoin. That's not my purpose, is to have enough to play with and experiment with, but not to make money on. And 2 times it's gone way up and made money. And just recently, I think Bitcoin is going to go to 100,000.
Steve Wozniak is great.
I know, he's the best. Somebody in the comments said Woz over Jobs changed my mind. And it's just because,
you need both.
Right, exactly.
Come on.
Exactly.
You need both.
Woz
could
need
not
the
run
Jobs
a company,
kind
let's
of,
be
right,
honest.
hard charging spirit. But the Woz
But the Woz
just
engineer
the heart
energy.
of all of it.
I conquered that.
Yeah.
I love that, man.
Bitcoin went up in price. And
I got scared.
I got scared. I didn't want to make money.
I mean, to be fair, the guy's quite wealthy, so he doesn't need it. I think he was one of the people that engineered Segway polo. Literally riding around on those little Segways playing polo. Yeah. So that's what you do when you're, when you have an enormous amount of money and you're just kind of trying to have fun. So as far as Bitcoin for him, he's just trying to have fun with it.
He's just trying to have fun with it, not in it to make money, and yet still believes that there is room for the price to go up significantly because of the power of the technology. So
I wonder how old that clip is, but yeah, it's obviously still relevant. So
7 days ago is when this Reddit thread was posted,
I feel like
it might be older than that. Yeah,
clip from earlier than that. I don't remember. Anyway, anyway, if any of you know, let us know. We've got the chat open here, so you can let us know. All right, moving on. Okta got hacked. Big deal, right? Okta.
Gigantic
we
deal.
We all know how, we all use Okta regularly.
We do.
Yeah. Well, we probably do, even though we don't know it. I didn't know what Okta is, so I had to go look them up because I use them regularly, even though I don't know it. They are basically identity management service built for the cloud. So it's kind of like single sign-on. It's part of the whole process of that. It's like if you want to connect to a service, rather than them handling that identity management login functionality themselves, they hand that over to Okta, and they do so because it runs in the cloud on a secure, reliable, extensively audited platform, which integrates deeply with on-premises applications, directories, and identity management systems. So, amongst the clients used by Okta are 1Password. So that's cool. Cloudflare, Beyond Trust, a handful of other kind of things. We've personally used 1Password, so I was aware of this kind of thing and thought, oh, that's interesting. And it looks like what's unfortunate is they didn't actually discover this themselves. It looks like Cloudflare is actually who discovered it and let them know about it. And then over the course of a little bit of time, they tried to figure out exactly what happened there and try to, dig into it and figure out what the root of the problem was. And it turns out, aside from the auditing of their code and everything that they claim their security is based on, there was a human vector involved. One of their engineers, it seems like maybe it was at the end of, they have a conference called Octane, where literally from their laptop in their hotel room, this exploit happened. So either someone, got access to their laptop, or they kind of scanned their laptop and got access to the keys that they had on it, or it's not entirely clear, because they haven't been entirely transparent about things. It literally took them a couple of weeks to come out with their own disclosure about things. Everyone else kind of came out with it right away. Fortunately, if you do use 1Password and in pretty much any other service, they've pretty much eliminated the possibility that any data related to those clients themselves was leaked or was exploited by the attacker. But honestly, it just, to me, it just reinforces the importance of, let's not keep on using the cloud for such important things.
Yep, exactly.
Like, you know
That's
what I mean?
exactly right. It's just like centralization takes an L once again.
Right. I've been frustrated by 1Password over the past few years, where it used to be that it was very, very easy to do self-hosting of your, because the way that 1Password works, and most other password managers work the same, is that all your passwords are stored inside a particular document, and that document or that file, whatever, is encrypted with your master password. So if you use a really weak master password, and someone got access to that file, an attacker could potentially have access to all of your passwords. So it's literally the most important password that you've got, because it means you certainly don't want to reuse passwords over and over again. And that's the reason that we need to use password managers, so that we can have somewhat secure passwords that you don't have to remember for yourself. You can depend on your computer to kind of remember them for you, but you secure it with one password that you have to remember. And since you have to remember it, some people are like, well, then it just has to be my cat's name or something. No, make it as secure as absolutely possible, because it's the only thing that's protecting all the rest of your passwords if there is a breach of that file itself. Well, there's two different ways. So you could use a really weak password if you were in complete control. And I'm not advocating that you use a weak password for your master password. But the point is, there's a separate part there. Someone has to get access to that file itself. So if you control it yourself, if you keep it exclusively on your computer and your computer is otherwise secure, you're generally okay. If you
Unless
need
your
to
computer
sync,
dies. I mean, we just
unless
have
your
to say
computer,
that.
well, that can be dangerous. You lose access to it. Exactly. But as far as kind of continuing to use it effectively, and you have multiple computers, and or you have family passwords you want to share with your partner or anything else like that, you need to have some sort of a synchronizing system. And so we were using a synchronizing system with a local copy of 1Password, and it worked really well. Well, 1Password decided that they needed revenue, and thus they needed to have a subscription service, and thus they needed to have you subscribe on a monthly basis rather than just buying the app once or anything else like that. That used to be their model. You needed to subscribe to a service monthly, and the only way they could justify that is if they're storing your file and keeping it protected for you. Well, I never liked that at all. Exactly. I never particularly liked that, and so I've resisted it. I don't even know if we finally ultimately upgraded to the version that required it, but it's been very frustrating that they're pushing in that direction, because they're basically forcing their users onto the cloud, and then because of the choices they're making,
because I'm pretty sure we didn't, and we did purchase the original license, and yet they were able to change the original license in a way where it like sort of stopped working.
There was a
for
version
us.
6 and version 7, and I think now version 8, which they just deprecated support for 7 or whatever it was, where even though you own the license to the previous one, eventually it stops. I think it was that it stopped signing the thing to Dropbox. You couldn't use Dropbox to sync and stuff like that. And so we could use offline storage things, but you can only use one of them at a time. Anyway, ultimately I found another one that I can actually self-host on a server that I'm totally stoked about. But ultimately the point there is, I don't like that security-related mechanisms are depending so heavily on the cloud and depending so heavily on other parties that depend on the cloud. And everyone's treating like, oh, the cloud is a super secure thing. Mm-hmm. No, it's not. No, it's absolutely not. That's absurd. It's very dangerous.
Think of the cloud as like a honeypot for anybody that wants your information, anybody that wants to steal money from you somehow, anybody that wants like it. The structure of it puts all of the delicate information in a single place, and therefore, if you get access to it, you get access to all of it, rather than the network being decentralized, which is where Web3 is going, so that, you'd have to target specific individuals in order to get things. So the payoff to the attacker is much, much lower because it's just a single person rather than this massive company's worth of data.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, I mean, 1Password kind of changed that vector a little bit because everyone's individual password file was protected with their own individual password, which isn't as bad as some of these kind of cloud systems treat it. But again, that then comes down to the dependence on the end user is using a hyper secure password. And let's be honest, most don't. So we need to get away from that kind of dependency and that kind of weakness. Web3 is obviously a big part of the solution. Obviously, we need to get better with key management in order for Web3 to work so that you're not dependent on some third party for your login system or for who's holding your keys and stuff like that. But that's solvable. And taking responsibility is a solvable thing. Like, as people recognize what it can get them if they do take responsibility and what it can lose them if they don't, give them motivation, and the ones that don't, whatever.
I think that entrepreneurs are going to have to make better products.
Oh, I agree.
I don't think that responsibility is enough or is the answer anymore. I used to.
It's a combo.
I think
it's a combo.
Theory
it needs to
of
work
responsibility
well,
is
but
good,
there's also
but
some responsibility
the practicality
involved.
of how it works right now isn't realistic.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right. Tether?
Yes. Okay, so Tether, which is I think it's the original stable coin. I could be wrong. If you know better, tell me in the comments.
It might
and so
maybe.
Obviously stable coins, they're intended to be a place that traders can keep their funds that's not going to have a lot of price volatility, so that when a trade does happen that they want to participate in, they have easy access to them. I weirdly also know people who wanted to get into crypto but felt nervous about how much volatility there was, and so they put all of their money into a stable coin. I can't remember. I want to say it was the Terra Luna one that somebody put their money into, and she's just wow, you got all of the downside and none of the upside. That was really tragic. But the Terra example really points to the issue with stablecoins is the issue of transparency, because they are functioning as this sort of bridge between the fiat world and the crypto world, and how the mechanics of how they go about being that bridge are really important as to whether or not the price will remain stable enough. A peg, usually it's to the US dollar, but some of the others have different pegs for a basket of currencies or whatever. We did an entire video in our basic series on stablecoins if you're new to that and want to check it out. So what's potentially exciting here is that Tether is saying that they're going to publish their reserve data in real time. So right now they do these quarterly attestations where they just say what the reserve holdings are that they have.
Is that the decentralized version of a quarterly earnings report? An attestation. I love that.
I suppose. But what's strange about that to us crypto folks is that typically the benefits, the reasons that we like blockchains are that the information is just all there. It's transparently available. It's easy to audit. You don't need to have these quarterly reports, these attestations where it's you saying, oh, just trust me, this is true. And that's essentially how Tether is still running things. And so it's possible that this upgrade that they're looking at doing, where they're doing the reserve data tracking in real time, could change that to where it's a more transparent how much reserves that they have, how things are moving around in terms of their assets. And I think that would be a huge win for stablecoins in terms of users being able to know that they are getting into something that's on the safer end of the spectrum. Because right now, probably the safest stablecoin, this is totally my opinion, is DAI, which is a smart contract controlled stablecoin that uses a basket of currencies, and it's running on Ethereum. So there's potentially some issues there, but the reason that it is in my opinion the best is that it's done the best job of maintaining its peg through some very volatile market conditions.
Well, and it has two really important components to it. It has reserve assets, and those reserve assets are tied to the execution of the smart contract. So it's able to respond quickly, be fast, be algorithmic. But all of those stablecoins that are purely algorithmic, Terra Luna was, that don't actually have a reserve asset that has its own value. That was the big problem with Terra Luna, is it had a reserve asset that was just a made up component of its own ecosystem, and so it didn't have any independent value. This actually requires Ethereum and Ethereum assets to be deposited on it, and then the smart contract just kind of weighs, is there enough deposited and adjusts requirements in order to keep the target exactly on. So that it's the kind of perfect combo of them, I would argue, and that's why it's behaved so well.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. Tether has gone through a lot of different iterations in its lifespan so far. I think of that funny quote about like the rumors of my death have been vastly exaggerated or something. It's just like the number of times Tether is going to die or not make it or whatever is crazy. They're still kicking and potentially moving in a really excellent direction.
Yeah, that would definitely be very good news if they did that. All right, well, on the Bitcoin network, as far as how the Bitcoin network is going to be able to handle the number of transactions that would be required for it to really reach a worldwide scale, we depend, at least on Bitcoin Core, primarily on layer 2 scaling solutions. Most directly, the Lightning Network is the one that gets the most attention. And this week we had some scary news in regards to the Lightning Network. One of the core developers working on it basically threw his hands up and said, I quit. This is there's a big, giant vulnerability here that could be really damaging, and I can't keep doing this anymore.
Yikes.
So yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate and kind of dramatic, especially because it hasn't actually been exploited by anyone, and it's a really complex attack. I actually spent a few minutes trying to write notes for myself to try to really explain. In order to explain the attack, I'd kind of need to explain Lightning Network first. It's too complicated to explain in any kind of short way. But to some degree, it has to do with the fact that in order for money to get from one party to another, unless you're very lucky that you have a direct connection with them, which you can create, but it takes some extra effort. For the most part, Lightning Network transactions need to be routed from one node to another node to another node to another node. In order for that to happen without any of the nodes along the way stealing the money, there are these kind of complicated HTLCs, hash time locked
Smart contracts.
Hash time locked contracts. Exactly. There are smart contracts on the Bitcoin network that basically can either be unlocked if a preimage of a hash is provided or a time period expires, a time goes by. Bitcoin network doesn't actually know time, so really it just means block. If we hit a certain block, something expires. And so using a combination of those two different things, you can kind of create a system where in order for one person to redeem their, if I'm the middleman and I'm relaying along $5, in order for me to participate in that system, I have to kind of write a check for that $5 to the next person before I've actually been able to make a deposit of the $5 from the previous person. But what I do have from them is I have kind of like an unsigned check. I have like a version of a check that I can make a deposit on once everything goes through. So as soon as the final party gets the transaction, they're going to basically send along some cryptographic information to the party before them that lets them unlock the deposit that they've got, and then vice versa, or all along the way back to the very end, so that everyone along the way, all they did was relay the money. And generally the concept works. Basically, a weakness has been theoretically figured out where if two sides of it, if the person who's sending to me as the router and the person who I'm sending to as the recipient are colluding with each other and play some somewhat complex games around timing and putting up new transactions that have a higher transaction fee than the previously disclosed transactions, and they do this all just right while I'm not entirely paying attention to some other aspects that are going on, it's possible for them to disrupt the routing process and basically have me spend the $5 to the next person and lose the ability to collect the $5 for myself. So that is both would break the underlying functionality of the system itself, and it would also mean that when I'm just like a participant that's trying to help this whole thing out, and I'm not supposed to be putting up any risk because I'm not actually the counterparty involved. I'm not the person that's sending or receiving. I'm just someone along the way, and I could be deprived access to money myself. So it's a scary attack for sure. let me read from the article here. It theoretically may allow sophisticated attackers to execute a transaction relay jamming attack and target a crucial Lightning Network component known as the HTLC, disrupt the normal flow of transactions, causing delays or preventing them from being processed as expected. And that kind of misses the lead that there is actually a potential risk of loss of funds. This article says that there have been patches that have been deployed across the Lightning Network and a whole bunch of different implementations of it that have adopted it. However, the particular dev involved who left, he basically said he's not entirely sure that they will work and that some more kind of fundamental work needs to happen. Like a more complicated version of the attack could still be mounted, theoretically at least. Again, amongst all these disclosures was also the fact that over at least in the last 10 months, I don't know where that threshold comes from. It's just the time period that they've been monitoring it. I don't know what. It's never been either done or even experimented with on the actual Bitcoin Live network. So who knows? And then someone else who kind of does it, and I'll include this in the show notes if you want to actually have an understanding. This does a great job of kind of recapping exactly how Lightning Network is supposed to work, and also how this attack works with some nice little visual aids, which is great. But he summarizes with, this attack isn't easy. Pulling it off involves opening 2 channels with the victim, routing a payment through the victim, successfully replacement cycling the victim's HTLC timeouts for delta blocks, and all that without the victim discovering the HTLC pre-image transaction. But it is hard to solve completely. There's been a lot of hand-wringing about this, that it's literally a limit of the speed of light, and that this is just something that literally can't be solved. And if you did solve it, someone else goes really nuts into this by saying if this was solvable, then it would break the thing that makes public keys secure. Like the math involved in solving it would undermine the whole concept of public keys, and so we would lose the security layer on Bitcoin.
Gosh.
That's their opinion, kind of. I mean, I don't know if that's really been borne out as true, but
that's really scary.
Yeah. So we'll see. So again, no one has actually done this attack, and so it might not actually be something that can be done in real world. But at the same time, I've always argued that my biggest concern about proof of stake is that it creates complexity and cost to pull off an attack, because you have to have a whole lot of collusion. You have to be able to separate a whole bunch of people from the actual internet and give them a fake version of the internet. It's a really complex attack to pull something off like that, and kind of a theoretical version of a proof of stake attack. But complexity doesn't stop heists. You know what I mean? If the payoff is high enough, and you can, it's Ocean's 11.
I was just going to say that we all love a good heist movie.
Exactly.
And
like
if the treasure is high enough,
exactly,
right?
The whole premise of the movie is the pot is high enough that you can hire experts in all these different parts, so that you can have a complex attack. Mm-hmm. That you would hire a very different set of people. To pull off this kind of an attack
is really like a social attack in a big way.
To some degree, right.
Exactly. You need to compromise certain.
You're compromising individuals
mm-hmm.
rather than providers of electricity and hardware and stuff like that, or
but
people
Lightning
that have
isn't a
access
proof of
to
stake
hardware.
network.
No, it's not. I'm using the analogy to say Lightning doesn't have as simple of a security mechanism as Bitcoin does. Bitcoin says the only way you get to have any amount of administrative control over the blockchain is if you have the most proof of work in this particular period of time. That's it. Plain and simple. There are no complex attacks. There's no complex anything kind of thing. And like proof of stake, Lightning's approach to handling its own security is with some complexity. And the initial implementation of it with this basic concept of HTLCs isn't super complex. Like it's somewhat complex for sure, but especially if solving this requires adding even more complexity, all that really does is just kind of solve it by making it more obscure, or that you need to have a more advanced attack, etc.
The HTLC, the hash
time lock,
was pretty elegant in its simplicity. Like, it's pretty smart. It reminds me of those credit cards that you pay to
like a prepaid debit
A
card.
prepaid card.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, basically.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how you open a Lightning channel. It's like you put in the amount of money that you're going to allow to that you're either allowed to use or that's allowed to flow through your relay, something
Right.
like that.
Both. Exactly.
And
Yeah, because
therefore
the sender of the relay needs to put up the money in advance before they can catch it
that's
from
how
the
you
other
have
side.
skin in the game. And
Exactly.
it's something I've wondered about if it will hold back Lightning's adoption or how that barrier to entry will affect adoption.
Right.
Because if you're going to move, the kind of money that you would need to move through that system to handle if Lightning is going to be the way that Bitcoin can be used for everyday transactions and have the
Replace
kind
credit
of
cards, et cetera.
throughput
Yeah.
as Visa,
Yeah.
you would need relay channels with
Enormous amounts of money.
huge amounts of money.
Right.
Where does that come
Right.
from? How does that
Right.
happen? Or
Right.
how do we get from where we are to there? I don't know.
Right.
Interesting.
And if this means that it also needs to introduce an enormous amount more complexity than it otherwise would have needed to, then that might, make it all fall down. So I don't know. I still have hopes because, like you said, it does seem like a pretty elegant solution to this. And it does ultimately depend, aside from these potential vectors, most of its underlying mechanism depends on the security of the Bitcoin blockchain itself, and which just means you can deploy it on any other type of blockchain similar to Bitcoin, and you'd get the security of that underlying thing. That's why people started talking about base layer and then layers above kind of thing. So that's a smart way of approaching it, I think. But if it introduces extra vectors on top, that's not.
Yep.
So
Yep. We'll see.
We'll see.
It'll be an
We'll see.
interesting,
Exactly.
interesting thing to watch.
Well, next on the AI front,
This is an exciting bit
just
of
got
news.
this one little. I mean, unfortunately, not. Well, it might be. We'll see. We'll see. It's kind of unlike. Okay, it's common for Apple to be late to introduce new
Exactly.
features. Like, obviously, the iPhone. That was an example where they were way out ahead of everyone else. They weren't the first to introduce a phone. They were the first to introduce a smartphone, and then everyone else in the market kind of followed them. They definitely weren't the first to introduce a tablet. The iPad wasn't the very first tablet. It was probably the very first tablet in that kind. I think it was the very first one in that kind of form factor and stuff like that. And then everyone else copied them, afterwards. So they definitely are good at waiting until a market is far enough along that you can introduce a really good version of it, and then everyone else follows them. That might not be the case when it comes to AI. I'm not entirely sure. They definitely got caught flat-footed. Anyone that's been following their hardware releases knows that they've been putting their own systems on a chip that has been inside of their iPads, iPhones, and computers for a long time now, have had the capability to process AI work. And some analysts thought this must just mean that they're deep working on their AI systems and they're just going to blow everyone away. From some kind of leaks from insiders, I have a line here. It's considered there's a lot of anxiety, and it's considered a pretty big miss internally. So basically, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, everyone came out with AI systems that are very impressive pretty quickly after ChatGPT kind of captured everyone's attention and hit 100 million users in no time and just did fantastically well. Everyone else has come out with their own, and they've been pretty good. And now the only thing that Apple has done so far is that they, quote, improved their autocorrect system in iOS 17. Well, for one thing, they need to, because Apple's autocorrect system is the thing of many a jokes between my friends and I and the whole internet.
I ducking love it.
Good one.
Thank
Very
you.
good one.
Thank you.
Yes. So apparently they do have their own large language model called Ajax, and they have an internal chatbot called Apple GPT that they've been using to test the functionality. I think they probably were thinking, like, this isn't going to take off as fast as anyone kind of thinks it is. These other companies will put out, because everyone knew that companies were working on AI systems and that, this is going to happen. There's a lot of money going into OpenAI, et cetera. And I think they probably saw that and thought, well, we'll just keep on moving along. We probably still have a few more years. And then this caught everyone by surprise, just exactly how successful this was. So now they're kind of scrambling it, and they're going to work it into everything that they can. They're going to be revamping Siri in a way that will deeply implement it. It's kind of funny because I get used to using, ChatGPT and a few other kind of AI systems to the point where I forget that Siri is still pretty stupid. Like I literally, you asked the other day why I had these weird calendar entries, and I was like, I was on a walk with our dog, and I was like, I thought of a couple of things that I wanted to put on my calendar, and I tried to tell Siri to do it, and I tried to tell it which calendar to put it on. And it didn't understand that, and instead it just named the things, the name of the calendar that I was trying to tell it instead.
Okay, that's
and it
what
was it was super confused. It's not. I mean, it's generally pretty good at understanding language. That's good, but it's not good at understanding what to do beyond that point. And you certainly can't tell
it's
it to
bad
do
with
very
instructions.
much.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully that will change with this. That would be great. It also looks like, or they say there's an edict to fill it with features, the next version of iOS, to fill it with features running on the company's large language model. We'll see, that'll mean like Siri and messages will both be able to field questions and autocomplete sentences. They're also likely to integrate it into their development tool Xcode, which would basically be very similar to GitHub's Copilot, so that it can do autocomplete and suggestions and stuff like that. And then also they're going to be doing things like on consumer apps, like adding AI features to Apple Music, including auto-generated playlists, which is something that Spotify rolled out earlier this year. And I gotta say, I love that. I don't know if I play most of the music.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're the music guy in our house.
Well, I've noticed how good that is. It used to be that either I had to find a playlist that someone made, or it made a few daily mix playlists for me that were pretty good. It was pretty good at listening to what I wanted to listen to and stuff like that. But now I can do something like just search for the words like evening chill music, and it will generate a playlist for me based on those concepts of those words and the kind of music I've listened to in the past. And it's great, And
I have noticed an increase in the quality of our playlists.
A little bit more diversity of stuff.
Yes,
not hearing the same songs over and over again.
The right vibe.
Feeling the right vibe,
yeah.
exactly. Well, that's Spotify nailing it. So maybe Apple Music will as well. We'll have to see.
Hey, that would be cool.
Exactly. And then they're also talking about integrating into apps like Pages and slide decks into Keynote. Again, all of this is just mirroring what else has already been done. Microsoft is pretty deeply involved in the OpenAI, invested in OpenAI, and so they already integrated autocomplete and suggestions and stuff like that into Word and PowerPoint. And it kind of goes into a little bit about, there's some debate about whether they're going to have things run completely on device or using a cloud-based setup or something in between. Apple does have an enormous amount of cloud infrastructure, but they have been building the hardware in such a way that it would be possible for it to do a lot of processing locally. I would imagine they're going to do some sort of a hybrid approach. It is weird for Apple to be so far behind on something so emergent and important, but it happens, these days, more and more since we lost Steve. It's happened more and more.
It's also just the natural cycles of business, and you're young and hungry in the beginning. You're able to move fast and get things done and be nimble. And as things get bigger and bigger and bigger,
you can't when you're. I mean, they are the biggest company in the world.
Harder to turn a cruise ship than a sailboat.
Exactly. So, but hopefully they'll catch up soon enough that it doesn't really matter that much, and they can just be part of the player in the game.
If Apple, maintains its standard with AI, I think that will really be delightful.
Right.
Its quality standards.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be really delightful.
So, we'll see.
All right, well, let's hop over to regulatory news.
Yes.
Do we have a clip from Eric to get things started? Yeah, let's do that first.
All right, Eric.
Hey everyone, this is Eric with your Web3 weekly policy update. The tenor of the day is national security. As you might have seen on the Web3 Working Group YouTube channel, last week the Wall Street Journal had a shocking report showing that Hamas had raised over $90 million using cryptocurrency to fund its terrorist activities against the state of Israel. Now, this was later rejected by Chainalysis report that showed that, in fact, they had overstated the amount of cryptocurrency used to fund these activities by over 100 times. And in fact, the Wall Street Journal had wrongly reported that this was the amount of cryptocurrency that had gone through the exchange and not the amount that had ended up in terrorist wallets, which was only about $400,000 worth of cryptocurrency. This also misses the fact that last year, Hamas said no longer to give cryptocurrency donations since they were too easy to track by intelligence agencies from both Israel and the United States. However, this has not stopped over 96 members of Congress from sending a letter to the Biden administration asking questions about cryptocurrency and its ties to funding terrorist activities. Most notably, this includes 2 Republicans, Congressman Roger Marshall from Kansas and Congressman John Kennedy from Louisiana, making this a bipartisan effort. It also includes members of the House of Representatives who had previously voted for stablecoin legislation from Patrick McHenry and digital asset legislation from Congressman French Hill, showing that this is a bipartisan effort and not an effort just from crypto skeptics. Now, at the same time, FinCEN, which is in charge of looking at money laundering activities specifically related to terrorists or non-state actors, has also released guidance on a proposed rule dealing with mixing services. You might remember stories about Tornado Cash and the lawsuit to shut that down going on, in fact, right now. This new proposed rule, which has 60 days for comment, is over 80 pages long and is busy being looked at by many folks who are looking to comment for fears that this will get rid of a lot of the anonymity and freedom on the blockchain. That was your Web3 policy update. I've been Eric. We'll see y'all next week.
Thanks, Eric. That whole letter, Warren's letter and all those co-signers and all of that craziness is so upsetting and silly.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah. I mean, it's just haters. I mean, I don't think everyone involved are haters of crypto. I think some of them are literally just they're believing the lies. But Warren is clearly a hater. Like, she's clearly 100%. Working for the bank.
But what's crazy is that this narrative is catching on at all when there is just overwhelming evidence that it's incorrect.
Yeah.
You know, that's like, again, just ignoring the benefits that blockchain brings regarding transparency, auditability, like the ability to verify these kinds of things is just being completely ignored. And it's
well, I mean, you have
ridiculous.
To wonder why, like Kibono, the industry that currently is pretty shady because they don't want to do those kind of things would have to start doing those things and being transparent if they were competing directly on a level playing ground with Bitcoin. And so they can't. They have to use their friends and hurt them.
Yeah. It's upsetting.
It's really
upsetting.
It's messed up.
All right. Well, in other upsetting news, there is officially now a suit in this Genesis DCG debacle that we have been watching play out on Twitter over the last several months. So just to do a little kind of recap of what happened here, basically, Gemini had a relationship with Genesis. Genesis is a subsidiary of Digital Currency Group, and Genesis was supplying the money for Gemini to offer its this product called Gemini Earn to its users. And Gemini Earn users, in their terms of service, basically said, you can use our funds in order for them to then get the benefit of this up to 8% return on their money. What happened is that when the FTX collapse happened, Genesis froze their accounts because they no longer had the liquidity that they needed to service everything. And what that meant is that Gemini customers then were unable to reclaim hundreds of millions of dollars of their cryptocurrency because they had allowed them to use it. So the part where this gets weird is that Digital Currency Group, through Genesis, they provided a loan. Sorry, let me see.
Oh, wow. Tied up with Alameda.
Yes, exactly. So internal documents at Gemini show that just months after Earn started, this Earn program in 2021, the company's risk analysis teams deemed Genesis, who was providing liquidity for this product, very risky because they were highly leveraged and had limited liquidity. Gemini also knew that Genesis loans were at one point tied up in Alameda Research. That's why their liquidity went away when FTX collapsed. So The lawsuit says that Genesis and their parent company, Digital Currency Group, tried to conceal these losses from Gemini Earn investors and the public. And the way in which they did that was by providing a loan, a 1.1 billion 10-year promissory note with Digital Currency Group to the Digital Currency Group provided to, I believe it was Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would give Genesis the liquidity to then service the Gemini customers.
Mm-hmm.
So
fraud is complicated.
It's it's a very bad situation,
Yeah.
and it's really upsetting to see because the players involved are all like great people from what I, just from the limited amount that I know of them, having been in this industry for 10 years. I was at conferences in the same rooms with Barry Silbert in the early days, and the Winklevoss twins are well known for speaking out on Twitter about issues like censorship and freedom on the internet and things that are just like important, right? And these people all seem like they have gravitated to the crypto industry because of the ethos and the kinds of positive change that it will bring into the world. And so it's confusing and sad to see that this kind of hijinks behind the scenes is happening inside of their businesses and then ultimately harming end users. Barry Silbert said in a statement that he was shocked by the baseless allegations.
That's a little bit suspicious, to be honest. I'm shocked.
Really? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. And because
I don't know. I tried to follow it for a little while, and it really did feel like DCG was being shady in their interactions with the Winklevosses. And so that kind of a reaction, I'm shocked by these baseless allegations. It just feels like what you say when you're caught and you don't want to admit. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I hope I'm wrong. I hope that
Yeah.
it's just a misunderstanding.
I mean, I don't know if it's true that the Genesis funds were wiped out and that DCG tried to cover for that. I mean, it's possible that DCG is just so enormous that covering for that wouldn't have necessarily been a problem for them, especially over a 10-year period of time.
Sure.
It seems like a potentially decent gamble.
Sure.
I don't know. It'll be something that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on as it plays out.
Yeah. Oh, this one's not cool. Okay, so U.S. seeks to label crypto mixers as a national security threat amid money laundering concerns. This is also tied to the ongoing hostilities in Israel and the claim that Hamas used massive amounts of cryptocurrency to fund their operations. And so basically they're just kind of saying, we don't trust mixers. If you're asking for anonymity or privacy, you have to be a criminal, and thus we're going to designate the use of those things as national security related, and our proof of that is this attack, and that this newspaper claimed that it was using a whole bunch of cryptocurrency. I don't think there was ever any claim that the cryptocurrency that went into those deposits came from Mixer beforehand. It's more just that they're kind of trying to lump things together ridiculously. And again, we just have to reiterate that that all the articles that tried to make it look this terrifying, scary thing, one, they were overestimating. Two, they were just misunderstanding. Literally, they said the headline number that they used was the amount of money that went through the whole exchange, not just the one wallet. And then that one wallet wasn't even necessarily the wallet that we're talking about as far as
Hey everyone, this is Eric with your Web3 weekly policy update.
That wasn't really just the funding of terrorist operations. It was in fact maybe like a local crypto dealer there in town that would take cash in exchange for crypto, and so some portion of that went to the terrorist-linked, specifically Hamas wallet, and so all of the numbers involved are overblown by as much as 100-fold or more. And more than that, it's like, well, what's the rest of it denominated in? Dollars. So are we banning dollars then? Or like, what about the anonymous aspects of dollars? The fact that it's literally in your hand and thus can't be tracked. Like, but more.
I love the Zcash saying that privacy is normal.
Privacy is normal.
Yeah.
Because it is. Because, well, okay, for one thing it is, but also it's constitutionally protected. The Fourth Amendment says you need to get a warrant. And there's steps involved in getting that warrant where you don't just get to just blanket assume that everyone that you want to target should be able to be targeted, and this is definitely that. And then our next story is kind of the same thing.
So the other question I had about this mixer thing is, like, I wonder how it's going to apply to technology like ZK. Like, is it
not directly because ZK isn't? But I can almost guarantee you, if they get it passed, they're going to then point to ZK and say, well, that's we hadn't noticed that before, but the entire cryptocurrency is basically one giant mixer. We have no transparency over this whatsoever. Again, what happened to the Constitution? You don't by default get automatic reporting on every financial transaction, and just because you convince the banks to do that voluntarily, because you're in this weird,
we're headed in that
incestuous relationship
right?
with them.
We are.
Well, that's what this next story basically takes us to, is that the IRS is also proposing, in addition to the other goofy stuff that they are proposing, that everyone that handles your money, including exchanges, including decentralized exchanges, that have the opportunity to collect private information about you, whether they do or do not currently, will be required to. The IRS is looking to require crypto service providers to collect unprecedented swaths of data about their users, including names and social security numbers. That's cool. So this basically came out of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. What? Why does that? What's the relationship there? Well, it was a very, very, very expensive bill. I think it was well over $1 trillion, and it didn't fully pay for itself as much as politicians were promising that it would. And so they're like, well, one of the ways that we'll get it to pay for some of its stuff is we'll do this thing where we'll start, we'll require, the IRS will require everyone to just spy on all their users and report all their activities, and it will recoup $28 billion because those scammer cryptocurrency people are stealing almost $3 billion a year by just not reporting on their taxes. Well, turns out that was a lie. The administration is now estimating that maybe we're actually talking about $2 billion over the next 10 years, so $200 million a year, and that even might be an overestimate on its own. But also, $1 trillion act, maybe $200 million of revenue coming from this, and the trade-off is that you have absolutely no privacy at all.
It's going to completely break some of these networks.
Oh, a whole bunch.
If this passes,
Not
it's
mention,
not going to be possible.
Not to mention that it will turn things into honeypots that don't need to be. Like you were talking about earlier, one of the biggest problems with the cloud is that it's a single place that you can attack, and that it has a whole bunch of valuable stuff. It might have money, or previously leaks that have happened in the past with a lot of stuff. They're not leaking money, they're leaking private information, and that private information is why we have so many issues with identity theft and stuff like that. And if someone gets your social security number and enough background information, they can open a bank account in your name, they can open a credit card in your name, they can open a loan in your name, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now this is going to require that every exchange that you interact with, even decentralized exchanges, which currently don't even have like a registration process. You just literally just go use the thing. You send crypto to one address and get crypto back, kind of thing, are going to be required to collect your private information.
That's the really scary part about this, is that it basically is going to apply to software developers. All of a sudden, just like software developers are going to be on the hook for stuff that is ridiculous.
Right. It's awful. And again, Fourth Amendment. So, unfortunately, using a constitutional argument against these kind of things just hasn't really worked lately. Like, there's just oddly just an assumption that the Constitution doesn't really apply anymore, which, what happened? What is going on here? So, I don't know. Hopefully, we can kind of recoup that. The other thing, though, however, is political pressure does work sometimes. They do have an open comment period. You have 4 more days. No, I'm kidding. Initially, it was going to be that it was all due on October 30th. They spent 2 years crafting this stuff after the Investment and Jobs Act or the Infrastructure Act passed. It took them 2 years to figure out their proposed rulemaking on how they're actually implement this stuff. And then they were like, yeah, you've got a month to give us a response. I think maybe 2 months. No, about a month. They fortunately have just extended that by a whole 2 weeks. So we're going to be, we've been working on a comment for a while now, having to do with how it's going to impact specifically deep-in protocol stuff. And there's a whole bunch of other entities that are working on basically the rest of the industry, but individuals should do as well.
Absolutely.
Here's actually LePunk X's Army has a comment tool that you can just kind of click through and generate a comment for yourself. Because, and this is important because when was this? So this is about a week ago. Hopefully these numbers have gotten up since then. But we're talking about less than 1,800 comments received so far. And there's stuff like ours and like Coin Center and stuff like that are multi-page long kind of things. There's a difference between those that someone puts a month into writing them and they're really, really long and extensive, and then the kind of comments that should come from the public where you're just saying, no, this is awful, this is against the Fourth Amendment, like check yourself, like you're going to lose all political support from the people who which you derive your support from.
And the thing is that those kind of comments are in some ways even more important than the kinds of comments that organizations will be sharing with these, because the organizations are going to be going into detail about the law itself and making all of those kind of arguments. So they have a place. They're important for sure to have the kind of, argument be made. But what can really move the needle is hearing from constituents.
Agreed.
And so if you have a few minutes, Kristen Smith at the Blockchain Association also has a great thread on this. And there's some AI tools that have been created to help you create like a unique comment that is pre-prepared for you to make it really nice and easy with just a few clicks. So
and this
definitely
is especially
check that
important
out.
because, as the article points out at the very end here, it's Congress that needs to step in to reform the system as a whole, because the IRS doesn't. Yeah, they are proposing rulemaking, but that rulemaking is based on the laws that were passed. And so if Congress sees that these comments have been flooded by people saying this is horrible, we'll never reelect anyone that was behind this again, they're going to take action. Well, I would hope. So we'll see. All right. Final story. We're jumping ahead to the House has a speaker. Finally. Yay. Well, should we be celebrating? Because that means that the House can now do stuff.
Yes, so absolutely. We've been waiting on them.
Stuff was a better situation.
I don't know. I mean, that's, there's the people in crypto who just want to pretend that we'll never be regulated because we haven't been for 10 years. And so, just keep the government out of it. And it's like, in order to get to mass adoption, we absolutely need
but also they're
regulation.
Not keeping out of it as it is. They're assuming that we fall into all this other BS. Yeah.
So the great news here. So for a brief moment over the weekend, Tom Emmer was being considered to be House Speaker, which would have been a huge boon for the crypto industry because he is an incredible champion who deeply understands the technology, understands the importance of keeping it here in the U.S., understands really nuance about crypto technology that a lot of legislators don't understand, in not just about Bitcoin, but about Web3, about DePIN, about privacy, all the kinds of issues that we've been talking about. Unfortunately, his bid was very short-lived. The good news here, though, is that instead we now have Mike Johnson. He was officially elected just before we started this broadcast today. And I don't know that much about him. I know he's from Louisiana. He's 51 and conservative, and Ryan Selkis posted this little video of him questioning the DHS secretary recently, and I thought we should play it because I think that we're going to have another excellent champion as Speaker of the House.
Congressman, what we do at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is identify the tactics that adverse nation states use to weaponize disinformation.
Okay, what is disinformation? What is disinformation?
Disinformation is inaccurate information.
Who determines what's inaccurate? Who determines what's false? Do you understand the problem here? The reason the framers of our Constitution did not create an exception for quote-unquote false information from the First Amendment is because they didn't trust the government to determine what it is. And you have whole committees of people in your agency trying to determine what they define as false. or misinformation.
That is not true.
Well, then what is true?
What we
Please
do
enlighten us.
is what we do is we disclose the tactics that adverse nation states are utilizing to weaponize
No, sir.
information.
No, sir. The court found specifically, it's a finding of fact that is not disputed by the government defendants, the Biden administration, your agency, the FBI, or DHS, not in the litigation. They determined you and all of your cohorts made no distinction between domestic speech and foreign speech. So don't stand there and tell me under oath that you only focused on adversaries around the world, foreign actors. That's not true.
So super exciting to see that we have somebody in the speaker role who cares about the issue of censorship. Censorship is one of those issues that is endemic in Web 2 and has had different kinds of moments in the sun where people care, but it's something that needs to be solved urgently. And Web3 obviously is the solution to that, and hopefully by having somebody who understands it with so much detail and feels clearly very passionate about the topic, that will be a motivation for him to begin to move the kind of crypto legislation forward that we need. So congratulations to our new speaker. We hope that you will help to keep the crypto industry here in the US. And that's our show.
See you guys later. See you next week.